over $1 billion a year gets spent on patent legal fees, and most of that work still gets done inside Microsoft Word, PDF previews, and email. Chris Parsonson looked at that and thought, yeah, I can fix this. He was 25, finishing an AI PhD at UCL. His brother happened to be an engineer, and his best mate happened to be an AI researcher. And so they set up Solve Intelligence. 3 weeks after writing their first line of code, they launched. Y Combinator backed them. Tom Blomfield, the guy who built Monzo and Go Cardless, became their group partner. Fast forward to today, over 500 customers across 6 continents, 8-figure ARR. He personally sold his way to 3.5 billion before he'd even hired an account executive. The company was profitable before it ever raised a Series A. Out of their first 300 heads-to-heads with customers, they didn't lose one. Patrick Collison, the co-founder of Stripe, who also happens to have built a company with his brother, is now an investor. So are Microsoft and Thomson Reuters. This is Chris's story of building Solve, going deep on patents when everyone else went broad, and why speed is the only thing that keeps him up at night. This is taking LegalTech to market. Chris, so 3 AI researchers doing PhDs at UCL. How did you end up building software for patent attorneys?
Yeah, so started the company back in 2023. And as you mentioned there, I did my PhD in UCL. So I was just finishing my PhD at the time. And I founded the company with 2 other people, my friend Sanj and my brother Angus. And there are a few different driving factors for how we started building Solve. So one is, like I mentioned, came from a technical background. So I was familiar with the patent process, but from the inventor's perspective. One of the things about patents is they heavily involve inventors because they're all very technical. So inventors get involved across that process. And so any inventor that has been involved with the patent process is aware of some of the time and cost pain points. So that was one of the driving factors. And the other one is that my partner, my girlfriend, Yasmin, happens to be a patent attorney herself. So I was familiar behind the scenes. There wasn't a huge amount of technology being used. And back in 2023, when I was finishing the PhD, was when we had this big step change in the performance of the models. ChatGPT in the end of 2022 and had some more models coming out in 23, which just unlocked a whole bunch of capabilities. And so just got super interested in trying to apply these LLMs to problems that potentially previously weren't solvable, but now might have been unlocked. And for those 2 reasons, really, patents were the thing that we thought of and we were very interested in from a technical perspective. And we just started building for patents and we've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. So, of course, you mentioned, and I know already, of course, you co-founded with your brother Angus. Building a company with your brother, is it a kind of challenge? Is it easy going? How do you 2 kind of divide those tough decisions and keep it family friendly?
Yeah, a lot of people say to us, man, I could never imagine founding a company with my sibling. But there's other examples where people have done it very successfully, like Stripe, for example. Patrick Collison's one of our angel investors. He founded it with his brother, John. And, many other examples. For us, it works extremely well. Angus and I have always been super interested in building startups and technology. For as long as I can remember, we've always been building side projects together ever since we were young. And so this kind of just feels like that, except we do it all the time. We're pretty close. We live together as well. Angus is an easy guy to get along with. And we also focus on different stuff. Angus is the CTO, very talented full stack engineer, focuses a lot on our back-end infrastructure, front-end stuff. And as things have panned out, I've sort of focused a lot on the sales and things like that. And then the third co-founder, Sanj, is a very talented AI researcher. So he focuses a lot on evals, AI algorithms, agentic workflows, and so on. So it works out pretty well for us.
Good, cool. And you, of course, went through Y Combinator back in 2023. What was the most useful thing YC gave you that wasn't money?
I think YC is useful for basically every aspect of the business. I don't think this is the most valuable thing, but even if you put aside everything else, just the brand of YC is undoubtedly very helpful these days because it's a well-known brand. It's helpful for every aspect of the company, whether it's hiring, it puts you on the map a little bit, makes you seem a little bit more legitimate to potential employees looking to join very early stage people. The first person we hired was Justin, who's a very talented patent attorney, and he found us through a TechCrunch article, and we would have never been published in TechCrunch if we hadn't been through Y Combinator. It helps with investors, it helps with customers as well. They're interested in these YC startups and so on. A lot of patent attorneys come from technical backgrounds themselves, and so they're familiar with YC. So just the brand is helpful. But really, I think, the most helpful thing is just you get put in this environment for 3 months in San Francisco, where everyone is very early stage. You're in a batch of maybe 100, 200 or so other companies. And every week or every other week, you're meeting up with people in your batch, and you're sort of going around in a circle saying, what are your weekly goals? And then you recap. Have you met the goals from last time? And if you have, then why weren't you more ambitious? And if you haven't, why haven't you? And everyone's going around in a circle. Everyone's kind of building up to demo day, which is at the end of it. And I think starting off your company in this pressure cooker environment where you see how that there's another level of performance that you can get to as a startup, because you're very rarely the fastest growing company in YC. It just really helps you get that sense of urgency right from the get-go. And really, speed is the most important thing when you're building a startup. It's the only advantage that you have in as a startup for big technology companies. And doing that right from the early days, which you can do in YC because you sort of put in that pressure cooker environment, just sets you up for success afterwards. And then, of course, our main partner at Y Combinator is Tom Blomfield. He's founded 2 unicorn companies, Monzo and Go Cardless, and has an unbelievable amount of experience. And then all the YC partners there are extremely experienced as well. So you just have this unbelievable resource of advice and so on, which is incredibly helpful. So yeah, it's basically helpful for every part of the business.
Yeah, I can absolutely speak to the branding piece, and certainly when I talk to candidates about Solve, when they see or when I mention that it's a YC-backed company, it just gives it that bit of extra credibility. So it's it's certainly, I can see that. And let's talk about how we actually sell this thing. So we've got to 400 IP teams, 8-figure ARR. Walk me through how you're actually doing this in practice and where your customers are coming from.
Yeah, so we build AI software for helping with every part of the patent process. So, taking a step back, there are a few parts of the patent process. There's invention harvesting, where you're collecting disclosures or ideas from inventors. There's then a triaging process where you're sifting through all these disclosures and deciding which ones you want to move forward with patenting. Then there's drafting the actual patent application. And then you file it with the patent office, and then the patent office comes back with a series of red lines on your application saying, hey, what about this piece of prior art? And you then go through this rebuttal process. That's called prosecution office action responses, and we help with that. Then there are all the post-grant proceedings. There's a sort of 1-year grace period where people can come in and or competitors can come in and try to invalidate your newly granted patent, say, hey, you should never have granted this in the first place. That's an activity that previously cost millions of dollars, and we can help with that process. And then, of course, there's patent litigation and licensing as well, which we also help with. So we build across that end-to-end process, and we sell it to the three people that are involved in the patent process. So the outside counsels, who tend to do the majority of the legal work, drafting, prosecution, patent litigation, so on. The in-house teams who mediate between the third party, which is the inventor who comes up with the idea, and the outside counsel, and often do a lot of the sort of portfolio management and so on. So we sell into both in-house teams and outside counsels. About 60% of our customer base are law firms, some of the biggest law firms in the world, and about 40% are big enterprise technology companies who have big patent portfolios. So to answer your question, we basically sell the software to both of those groups, and then they use it to collaborate in a back and forth manner. So we basically help with that sort of back and forth collaboration between in-house and outside counsel teams across the end-to-end process.
Gotcha. Cool. Absolutely. And believe it or not, everybody, I am not a patent attorney, but I did sit through the demo a couple of days ago, and I did put myself in the shoes of a patent attorney, and knowing a bit about the history of how patents have traditionally been done, I did think, if I'm looking at this for the first time, this is my job, I'm thinking, well, my life has changed here with this type of product, which is always a great sign. And patent attorneys, of course, are liable for their output. They handle confidential information under legal privilege. Selling AI into that environment sounds like it could be like selling ice to a polar bear. So what's the biggest objection you keep hitting, and how do you get past it?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, there's a huge amount of difficult technical work that goes into the patent attorney's role, whether it's claim drafting or thinking about strategy for responding to an office action or during litigation, so on. And then there's also a lot of basically grunt work. When you're drafting patent applications, there are all these things you have to do with reference numerals, making sure that each part of each claim is being supported and enabled in the specification, pulling in things like file wrapper documents, filling out cover sheets, all this kind of stuff, which actually is not a good use of time for these legal professionals. And that's, of course, where AI comes in and is really great. And, if you look today, if you look at our testimonials and case studies we have on our website, you talk to customers who are using Solve, these attorneys are getting sort of 40, 50, 60% plus efficiency and quality improvements. And to your point about, it's something that changes the way they work, it absolutely is. And one of the nice things is that we get people coming to us and saying Solve has enabled them to actually enjoy doing a lot of the work that previously they stopped enjoying. Partners who previously had to stop drafting things like patent applications because their billable rate gets too high, and they also don't want to be spending time on a lot of that grunt work. But now AI can do all that, and they can free up their time to focus on claim drafting, for example, which is super high value for the client. So it absolutely is improving people's workflows, and they enjoy using the software. But to your point, patents or drafting patent applications and dealing with these unprotected invention disclosures is just about the most confidential data that you can be dealing with. Some of these patents go on to be litigated for billions of dollars. And so, they're worth a lot of money. And if a patent gets publicly disclosed, it's now no longer eligible for getting a patent on it. So security and confidentiality are the number one priorities of what we do. They've always have been. They've been front and center of everything that we build here at Solve. And so a key part of our role over the last 2 years has been building a lot of trust with our customer base. And that has kind of just compounded over time. We're now selling into over 500 companies. We sell to, as I say, some of the biggest law firms, some of the biggest technology companies in the world. And that is because we put security and confidentiality front and center of everything that we do. So yeah, it's super, super important.
I read that you've said that when you've taken this product to market, you've never lost a head-to-head with a competitor. Is that statement accurate?
Yeah, well, look, we have been in many head-to-heads up to now. If someone now, that is no longer the case. People have, up until the first sort of 300 or so customers we'd never lost in a head-to-head, and now maybe there's been a couple of cases where a customer has gone with another supplier, and but in both of those cases, it's been where they basically didn't really test out the software. One of the decisions that we made early on was to build the entire end-to-end flow ourselves, to give ourselves complete control. There's been a couple of the more legacy tools which have basically built into, for example, Microsoft Word. And we've built full back and forth compatibility with Word. But the advantage of building directly into Word is that if people aren't fully engaging with the AI, it's basically like an easy sort of get out of jail free card. They can say to their boss, we've picked an AI solution, but actually they don't need to adopt the technology because they can continue using whatever workflow they've been doing before. So it has happened a couple of times now, but it's mostly been when people haven't engaged. And what's quite nice is that so there's been 2 occasions where that's happened. And in one of those, that customer's now come back to Solve because they've basically done a full deployment and they've decided that actually this hasn't worked as well as what they were hoping. So yeah, I mean, we're still, market leaders, and I think actually in many ways that lead is accelerating because we made these early bets about building end to end. We get this kind of compounding advantage in the product, and over time, the product becomes increasingly valuable. The more stuff we build into it, and the more of this collaborative functionality we build to actually make the end to end client experience better, which is aligned with what the law firms want too. So yeah, I think the lead is in some ways increasing in terms of both traction and product quality.
Yeah, I think sometimes losing out on a customer, but then them coming back can feel even better sometimes. And I think if we've sold to over 400 customers, maybe lost out a couple of times in the head-to-head, that's still 99% of the time, I'd say, at least, that we're winning. So that's some pretty good numbers. Harvey went broad across all of legal, of course. You've gone deep, and the team at Solve have gone deep on patents. Has there been a moment where somebody like an investor has said, why don't you expand into contracts or litigation? And if so, what made you stay the course?
Yeah, well, look, we have a huge amount of respect for the general legal tech products and all the stuff that's happening with the Harveys, the Lagoras, the Spellbooks, the companies like that, and I think they're doing a lot of great work. We sell into many customers who have general practices which are using those pieces of software, and really Solve is complementary to a lot of them. There's a lot of things that are very specific about patents that benefit from having specific patent software built. For a start, patents are very technical. It's kind of reflected in the backgrounds of patent attorneys. All patent attorneys come from technical backgrounds. They often do an undergrad, a master's, and often also a PhD in a STEM subject before then spending years qualifying as a patent attorney. And that's because the patents are very technical. And so you have to be able to deal with all this technical multimodal inputs and outputs. So things like technical drawings, figures, images, biological sequences, chemical structures, equations, raw tabular data, and so on. And so the kinds of models and the algorithms and so on that you have to build tend to be quite different from what you might use with the general legal tech tools. And then also a lot of the workflows are very different. Things like drafting an application, responding to an office action, building out a claim chart, all of those things tend to lend themselves well to having a vertical focus. And then then it's a question of resources and where you should be focusing your efforts. For us, there's over $100 billion spent in legal fees every year across the patent process, and there's over $200 billion a year generated in licensing revenue from licensing patent portfolios. And yet there's hardly any software that's used across that process. Most of the workflows are done inside Microsoft Word, PDF previewers, and email. And so there's just a huge greenfield opportunity to build software that's all been unlocked by large language models. And so I think the opportunity there is big enough for us to only focus on patents. And so certainly none of our investors are saying, hey, go and focus on, commercial contract reviews and things like that. We're very much focused on patents. And I think the interesting expansion opportunities to really help with the actual invention process as well. Patents are all about capturing some fraction of the value of the R&D that goes on inside these big corporations. And so imagine Solve Intelligence that works across the whole patent process, being able to be plugged into all of the internal R&D work, the meeting notes, project summaries, academic papers, and so on going on inside these big technology companies, and then being able to flag and pipeline the most promising novel and unobvious ideas that are sort of weighted against the strategic and business direction of the company, and then automatically being able to really accelerate that entire patent process to try and protect and then also eventually monetize portfolios. I think that's the more interesting expansion opportunities into the R&D process.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. And in terms of monetization, I guess from what I've seen, it looks like you achieved a hell of a lot in terms of bringing in business and logos before you even hired your first account executive. So I think it looks like you did a lot before that. So what was that journey like pre-building out your sales team in terms of bringing the business in, and then what made you decide right now's the time to bring in an account executive?
Well, we spent a long time going super deep on product with our customers. So for a very long time, the only people that we hired in the company were patent attorneys, software engineers, and AI researchers, AI PhDs, and so on. And the reason for that is that patents are very technical. It's very difficult to build this software and get AI working in a reliable, verifiable way. And so we wanted to make sure that we went very deep on the product. And because we were building the best product and in the space, we were sort of just organically growing. So for a very long time, it was basically just me doing all of the sales and marketing. And then as we brought on more attorneys, they'd help with a lot of the sort of customer success thing, and then started helping with some of the go to market as well. But we didn't bring on a sort of full-time account exec until we were about, 3.5 million of ARR or something like that. So it wasn't a big focus of what we're trying to do. We've always been laser focused on product and making sure that we're building the best possible software and working very closely with our customers and our in-house team of patent attorneys to do that. We are now at the point where we're sort of really scaling that go-to-market, and that's how we've now been able to scale to over 500 customers across 6 continents, going across patent prep and prosecution, as well as patent litigation, licensing, and so on.
As we talked about a lot, it takes a certain type of person who can connect with your ICP, which is, of course, patent attorneys. What do you look for when you're hiring account executives? What do you look for from people that makes you feel like this person could be successful and be a good representative to Solve?
Yeah, the most important thing I always think, and this is probably true of all sort of sales and go-to-market and so on, but it's just being able to communicate in a clear and above all sort of honest manner. A lot of these patent attorneys that we go on calls with, they're sort of partners, directors, owners of these big law firms, or sort of heads of IP and IP managers of these big enterprise technology companies. They've got decades of experience. They're very smart. They're very technical, and they've given you half an hour of their time to see a demo. And so you always want to be completely honest about what the technology can do, what it can't do. You want that to be communicated in a clear manner. So that's always the most important thing. And then the second most important thing are people who are basically just very high agency, very smart, and they can pick this stuff up. Ultimately, patent attorneys and legal professionals want to speak to other patent attorneys and other legal professionals. And that's why we've always made bringing on patent attorneys into our team front and center of everything we do. Our product direction is all kind of steered by our own in-house team of patent attorneys, as well as our customers. And then once customers sign up with us, we always bring them on and introduce them to our team of patent attorneys so we can help them get the most out of the software. But people who are focusing on sales and go-to-market have to be able to pick up these very technical terms and products and concepts and so on in a very short amount of time. Because even if you're demoing to a patent attorney just for half an hour, if you're not able to pick up the basics and answer questions that patent attorneys want to ask, then it's not going to work. So it's a bit of a, we look for people that can work very hard and feel super motivated and really want to build something special, but they also have to be very smart, very fast moving, and able to pick this stuff up quickly.
If a brand new AE starts with Solve, what's the direction you give them for those first kind of 2 to 3 months in terms of building up that desk, building up that pipeline? Where do you kind of steer them to?
Yeah, well, the first and most important thing is to familiarize themselves with the product. The product is the most important thing for every job function in our company. And so we put a massive emphasis on, even before people start, to get familiar with the product, set them up with an account, show them the demo materials. Usually on their first day, we'll be getting them to come on to a sort of Patents 101 course with a few of our attorneys that we can actually walk them through what a patent is, all the basic concepts. And of course, it's going to take time for them to build up familiarity with all the lingo, the concepts, and so on. But we really want to get them up to speed on the product as much as possible. Then we add them during the course of the first week or so to many onboarding calls and support calls with our patent attorneys. So once we've landed an account or landed some patent attorneys in, whether it's a law firm or in-house team, we then set up a call, an onboarding call, where we can get them set up and answer any questions. And then we'll have recurring check-in calls so they can ask questions. And those are always led by our own team of patent attorneys. But those are the kinds of calls where customers have had a chance to start playing around with the software. And so the kinds of questions that they ask tend to be much more practical and deeper questions than what they might ask on the demo calls. But on the demo calls, you might sometimes get some of those kinds of questions. So it's very useful to sort of throw these new account execs in the deep end and really familiarize themselves with the kinds of things that a natural customer cares about. And then we'll start getting them to come on to a lot of first calls with our own sales team so they can shadow those guys and see how they're doing things. And then we'll get them to start sort of giving us some dummy demos, whether it's myself or some of the other account execs or patent attorneys on the team, so they can get practice there. We also always encourage them to just record themselves and watch it back so they can kind of see how they're demoing the software, really try and get it to be crisp and clear, and also getting all the terminology and the concepts right. And then, we get a huge amount of inbound at Solve. So probably about 60% of our deal flow comes from inbound, and that's because we've been able to build a great reputation in the industry for having the best product that works best for patent attorneys, and so that's kind of compounded over time. So we can always then start allocating demos to the new guys, and they're always supported by an existing account exec and by a patent attorney on the call, so they can help guide through the questions and so on. And then over time, we'll start getting onto bigger and bigger calls. We'll start getting to come to events and conferences with myself and the team. Events are very important for meeting new customers and existing customers and building those in-person relationships. And so this year we're going to over 40 conferences at Solve and sponsoring them and so on. And then, of course, connecting with people on LinkedIn and sending them messages and things like that. So just basic stuff, building up the network, learning about the product, and integrating themselves into the patent community.
Awesome, awesome. So if we look forward to the next 12 months, two questions about that. Where are you putting the most investment financially into, be it people, products, or whatnot? And then two, what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, so we are, up to now, we have been a US topco with a UK subsidiary. We're now spinning up offices all over the world. So we now have three offices: London, New York, and Munich. So we're heavily investing in, both all three: US, UK, and Germany. We are building up our team of patent attorneys. So getting more patent attorneys across Europe and across the US and also across Asia. We're seeing expansion in Asia too. So we can continue with both the product development and also the customer support aspect of what it is that we're doing here. And then, of course, we're scaling up our engineering team. We've got a huge amount of stuff that we want to be building, a lot of super exciting, completely new products that we're going to be building. Agentic workflows are the new thing that's become unlocked with things like Opus 4.5, 4.6, and so on, with tool use and things like that. And so we've got a huge number of projects, both complete new products and new features and so on in existing products that we're looking to launch. And so we're looking for super talented engineers to help with that. So we're sort of investing across the team, across all countries. And then, of course, go to market. We've got a great product that people love, and we're looking to try and get that in front of as many people as we can. And so we're looking for great, high energy, as I say, smart, great communication, go-to-market experts that can help us sort of with that, reach that next level of growth. And then things that keep me up, it's always the same thing. It's just not moving fast enough. Speed really is the most important thing in a startup, and especially with in the world of AI, things just move incredibly quickly on product, on go-to-market, on demand from customers and things like that. And so making sure that we bring in the right kind of people that can move super fast, people who care deeply about what they do. And so they're willing to put in the extra effort and move that little bit faster to get things into the product or get something done for a customer and so on. That's the biggest risk for any AI company, including us. And so those are the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about. How can we accelerate the speed over time?
In terms of that investment piece in people, we're obviously hiring a lot right now. What do you find to be the toughest role to recruit for? And it could either from a search perspective or just from that you interview them, you're just like, I don't know if this person's right. What do you find the toughest type of person to recruit?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that hiring is definitely the hardest part of doing a startup. Uh, I think that it's easy to make mistakes, especially when you start the company and you have no experience. And then you realize that if you were to plot a sort of Venn diagram of the attributes that you need for someone who is suitable for a company like Solve that's growing extremely quickly, there's a lot of things you need and not a lot of people that have those sort of overlapping attributes. So you need people that can work super hard, but also have very high quality of work, people who are very smart, people who care deeply about what they do, quite obsessive people that don't see work as like a 9 to 5 star thing, but this is what they really want to do. They want to build something special. They want to build a generational company. Those are the people that we need. And then, for the technical guys, they need to be extremely smart technically. For the go-to-market guys, extremely smart to be able to pick up all of the concepts with patents, familiarize themselves with the technology. And remember, patents sort of, by definition, they all interface with state-of-the-art, novel and non-obvious concepts. So you have to work with life sciences, biological sequences, chemical structures, equations, software, quantum, electrical, mechanical, hardware, inventions, and so on. So it's difficult to find go-to-market people that want to dive in that deep technically and build these long-standing relationships with very technical customers. I mean, if I was to pick out one single role that's difficult to hire for, it's difficult to say because we're sort of hiring multiple people for all roles, and it's just hard to hire for all of them. I would say probably engineers who are good at building the way that you need to build in a startup, so very quickly, but also very high reliability. Um, and those probably are the hardest ones to hire for. But having said that, we hire pan attorneys, account execs, full stack engineers, front end, back end, AI engineers, and so on. And that finding the greatest people, the top sort of 1% talent in any field, is very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could go back to 2023 and give yourself one piece of advice about building a go-to-market in legal tech, what would that be?
I think when we started, it's not like we had any sort of grand or clever vision for doing things. We basically, Y Combinator has got a lot of extremely good advice. And myself and my co-founder Sanj and Angus, we drank the Kool-Aid on absolutely everything. So the most important piece of advice that they have is their slogan, "Build something people want." And
Mm.
we just really went deep on focusing on product and never building stuff in silos. So we launched our product 3 weeks after writing the first line of code. We launched right at the beginning of the Y Combinator batch, and then we just iterated. And we signed up customers, they would give us feedback, and we just keep iterating on the product. And it might sound like that's not related to go to market, but of course it is, especially in the world of AI, because it's all about products and building the best products and one that actually works and working with your customers to iterate on that. And if you can sign up, say, you cold outbound 1,000 people, and maybe 20 or 30 of them reply to you, and then you can close 10 of them, you've got your first 10 customers. And then if you give 5 of them a really great, you give them all a great experience, and 5 of them stick with you, and you keep iterating the product, they're going to introduce you to 2 or 3 other people, and that's how you start getting this compounding effect of getting more introductions and growing in the industry. And that's exactly what we did to get the go-to-market flywheel going. So all I would say to myself in 2023 is, really focus on the product, focus on the patent attorney workflows, talk to patent attorneys every single day, make sure that what you're building works for patent attorneys. You're not just trying to build inside of what you think should work, and that then feeds into go to market. And then there's things we've learned since then to involve our own in-house team of patent attorneys across go to market, the importance of going to events and hosting events and meeting people in person, different channels that we found to work very well. But when you're starting the company, really product and talking to customers is the most important thing.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, I think the trajectory and story of Solve is one that's incredibly inspiring. So I appreciate you sharing that with us on taking LegalTech to market. But obviously, I'm rooting for Solve all the way. And thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.